All right, welcome to the Trail Talk Tuesdays with K-State Research and Extension and sponsored by Sunflower Foundation and the Kansas Trails Council. The purpose of the Trail Talk Tuesdays is to give communities the resources and information they need to build and maintain public trails. We want you to see and hear from other people in Kansas who have done this work in their communities. As always, the call is being recorded, and you will receive a link to the website, a copy of the presentation deck, and the Zoom chat. Please tell us why or if this call matters to you at the end of this call. There are 3 short survey questions, and so I'm going to tell you what to think about as we're going along. First of all, did you learn something today that you can use immediately? Number 2, how many people will you forward this information to? And 3, what did you learn that was most helpful to you? And we'll forward this to all the speakers. So thank you so much. And with that, I'm going to start, share our screen and our presentation. Easier said than done. Okay. Here we go. Today's talk is on trail sustainability, and we have 4 speakers. Our first up is John Leahy from Thrive Allen County.
Great. Thanks for the introduction, Nancy. Again, I'm John Leahy. I'm the Director of Trails for Thrive Allen County and the ground supervisor at the newly minted Lehigh Portland State Park. So what we're going to talk a little bit on my portion about today is maintenance. Elizabeth said it perfectly earlier. This is the less glamorous side of trails for sure. So at Lehigh, I am responsible for maintaining approximately 14 and a half miles of trails and over 360 acres of lands. So just to give you a brief background, I've been with Thrive for the past 2 years, and I've gotten to talk with a lot of particularly new trail builders around the state. And one of the things that people are really excited about is building new trail, and not so many people are excited about the maintenance of trails. So why are these things important? Oftentimes this is really invisible work that happens. Maintained trails, oftentimes you don't see the people behind them, and you don't see the care that's taken to make that a quality experience for people. Because at the end of the day, building trails is about increasing quality of life. So what is sort of this slide about? We want to balance our recreational needs with our ecological needs by making sure that people have accessible information about what they're seeing, because at a very base entry level, getting trained eyes on the trail is the most useful tool we're going to have in specifically looking at starting to do maintenance. So what does maintenance mean? Nancy, can I get the next slide, please? So really on a base level, these can be things as simple as trimming and lopping, cutting fallen trees that have fallen across the trail, like on the slide there, repairing erosion or the tread of specific trail, depending upon what your trail is. Those things might look different. Mowing and spraying are also very large portions of my job. And also maintaining trail amenities, signage, trail structures, art. Those things look like a lot of different things depending on if you're rail trail, if you're doing single track, if you're doing wide gravel screenings trails. Those things all look a little bit different for every trail. So what can that look like too? That can be something as simple as picking up trash, curating those points of interest. If you get people who are really interested in particularly chainsawing, mowing, getting out there with a Pulaski to do some of those things that I know Mike talks about all the time, particularly taking care of the tread of the trail. Really what we try and do with our maintenance is cater people's specific needs to the parts of maintenance that align with their interests. So we get some more vested people, particularly doing this work. Nancy, can I get the next slide, please? So one of the most important things about trail maintenance is working efficiently. And what helps us work most efficiently is knowing when particularly to do things. So this is a really simple thing, but in the spring and summer, those things are obviously mowing season. So our brush management, things of those nature are going to become really important. And in the fall and winter corridor and making sure our surface is a nice surface going into some of those rainier, more heavily precipitated seasons. Obviously, you know, if you're spraying in the winter, there needs to be a reason for that. And there are some of those reasons, particularly taking care of invasive species that sometimes those things run into. Nancy, can I get the next slide, please? So along the lines of efficiency, knowing specifically what during those seasons is going to be the best use of your time. So I like to say, particularly string trimming, if you're going, you know, a mile, it could take you 4 hours with a string trimmer to do all of those things. That might take you 2 hours on a brush mower. Or if you're spraying, that could take you 1 hour. So, you know, a quarter of the time, if you hit the things during the right season, you're going to be doing everyone a favor. Next slide, please. So one of the main things that you've probably heard me say is accessibility. All of our maintenance efforts are particularly to increase accessibility, to increase that user experience. And so when I say accessibility, I'm talking about a number of different things. I'm talking ADA accessibility to make sure that people with different mobility needs have good trails that they have access to. Skill, both in the difficulty, particularly of the trails. Sometimes it's not appropriate to change said surface of your single track because you know that's for mountain bikers. And then also to make sure that training materials are readily available for those people. Emergency access has been a huge one, particularly with our state park recently. And just making sure, you know, on those off the beaten paths, first responders can get in there should there be an emergency. And then the last one that I really like to highlight is access to that nature. You know, without nature, you know, going outside is the main reason people like to go on trails. So making sure that they have accessible pieces of good nature that is a positive control point that also needs some management in conjunction with a trail. So next slide, please. There are two major areas I want to talk really, really briefly about if you're doing anything on trails. Again, brush management and trail surface problems. So really, really briefly, brush management. Keep your trail corridors really wide. The trail extends past that surface quite a bit. And that happens for two main reasons. Number one, to make sure that people aren't getting snagged out there when they're utilizing the trail. Obviously, all those face slappers, we want to make sure those are out of the way. And then also to make sure our equipment isn't breaking on things along the side of the trail and that we're using the proper equipment on said portions. And then number two, next slide, please. Making sure our trail surface issues are also taken care of. So to make sure water isn't running directly down the surface of the trail or standing in pools. These are a bunch of different methods of taking care of those. One of the big things I like to say, particularly for folks with new trails, and Mike was just talking about some of this, keeping folks off wet trails. We're actually having an issue with that currently at the state park. We're trying to do some re-education about when people should be using particular trails. And that's also another good part to say, you know, We try and educate people on the front end so we don't create larger maintenance issues down the road. So that feeds into our next slide, Nancy. Trail recruitment. I'm very lucky that there are some very active volunteers in our area who heavily donate their time. But there's 60 plus miles of trails and routes that all need maintenance in Allen County, and 14 and a half of those are at Lehigh. I wouldn't be able to do that without the help, without people out there mowing, without people out there spraying, without their people taking care to let me know when there are maintenance issues. So when I come across new people on the trails, I always see that as an opportunity to get those people involved, to make sure, number one, that they see those invisible things that are happening, and number two, to say, hey, is there something that you're really interested in that we can get you involved? So if you would go to the next slide, please, Nancy. I always like to, if I'm bumping into somebody out on the trail, I'm going to ask them two really simple questions. What trails are you using, and why do you use them? In larger context on your screen, I'm saying, okay, great. What skills do you have that maybe some of the other people we don't have out here? We can tap into those resources. We can make this a specific opportunity for specific people. And what interests do you have? You know, we've been really successful at the state park, particularly with some naturalist groups, birders, herpetologists, ichthyologists recently. It's been a wonderful sort of confluence of, you know, getting two birds with one stone. So one of the other things that we also do to take care of those things is we hold monthly scheduled work days, and we've also started doing trail orientations to further train the public on specifically all of the maintenance things that we go and do on a daily basis. Trying to, again, educate folks in a fashion that, number one, connects with their interests, meets a need for the current trails, that again looks at the sustainability of those trails, and then also just generally speaking educates people to, if they see something, say something, because again, that is a huge underutilized resource for a lot of trail users. Particularly, we found a lot of luck with our trail orientations during our hot and cold seasons. It's a wonderful way to say, hey, you know, maybe if you're not interested in coming in during these months where the weather's not great, we can talk with you specifically about what you see on your own time. And it's been wonderfully successful for us. So I'm going to hand things over to Mike. I think we're doing okay on time here.
Looks good, John. Yeah, by the way, one thing we do, we use what we call trail watchers, people who don't actually do work sometimes, but they're interested in helping do work, and therefore they're out there on the trail every day. They see a tree down, they let John know, and they let us know, and then we can more efficiently go get the tree cut. So just another tip on physical maintenance. I'm going to talk about the boring part of sustainability, and that is, how do you get organized to make this thing last? Why does organization actually matter from a trail builders or trail maintaining maintenance perspective? You know, and John said this too, it's easy to get really excited about the new trail and, wow, we're going to break out another half mile or another mile of trail, but wonder where those folks will be in 3 years. So it really does make a difference if you have people who are committed to the trail and stay with the trail. And one way to do that is by achieving an adequate organization. In a way, there's safety in numbers. If there's only one person doing the trail, he or she may get transferred or change interest or something. But if you have a group or an organization of some kind, you're more likely to sustain that effort. And so you'll have continuing support because you've got an actual established group. Funding also is a big factor in any trail development, and it's often not available to the average individual, but only to organizations, especially nonprofits. So Nancy, maybe the next slide would be good. So what are the benefits of setting up a nonprofit, and why should you think about doing that? Well, obviously, a lot of funders provide funding and grants to nonprofits, but they would not provide funding to just a club or an individual. And so it's obviously important to have the organizational setup in order to receive funds to comply with the rules of the various funding opportunities. Um, and once you set up a nonprofit, it exists into perpetuity. So that initial individual or group who set up the trail development, they may come and go, but the entity would still remain with officers and board of directors and some kind of permanency. Um, it also adds some, Nancy, hold it one sec. Here we go. Yeah, I was just going to say, having a nonprofit adds some legitimacy to the group and enables you to, for example, obtain tax deductible donations, which can, in the long term, be very important. It's kind of easy to get money to build a trail. It's not so easy to get money to maintain a trail. Those are more of the operational costs that we all seek out. So it also gives you an opportunity if someone wanted to bequeath um, funds from a family, you could actually build a small endowment, which would enable you to um, perhaps invest in interest-bearing CDs or treasures or something. That annual income can be sustaining. I might give you an example. The Kansas Trails Council, for example, received an endowment back in the 90s, which we maintain today, and the interest provided from those invested funds provide a lot of our ongoing operating budget and has enabled us to be more sustainable than we would have otherwise been just seeking out individual grants from time to time. So Nancy, now the next slide. So before you go down this path, you need to be thinking a little bit about what's involved in setting up a nonprofit trail organization. One thing people don't really maybe tumble to initially is when you're setting up a nonprofit, you are setting up a nonprofit corporation. It's actually a business in many respects, and it does incur some initial costs, largely legal fees. You'll need to draft articles of incorporation. You'll need to draft governing bylaws, and you'll need to seek 501c3 approval from the IRS. IRS Form 1023, I think, is the application form. Before we go too far into this involving the legal fees and such, we're not trying to give you legal advice by any means in this session, but you really should talk to an accountant and an attorney in order to get, adequate legal advice. So it keeps you going down the right path legally, and rely on the professionals to sort of guide you there. Once the organization is established as a 501c3, then you do have some ongoing reporting requirements. The IRS requires annual reporting of your finances, either a Form 990, which is very long, or a Form 990 EZ, which is a little shorter, or what they call an e-postcard if you have generally under $50,000 income per year. And I might tell you, if you did the Form 990 EZ, and you have all along through the year kept your accounting up to date, it still may take you literally a couple of days to complete that form. So for the larger organizations, if you have more income coming in, be aware that's a fair time commitment, and you may have to engage your local accountant to actually pull that form together. It's fairly complicated. If you're under 50,000 per year, you simply acknowledge that you are under 50,000 per year, and it literally takes about 5 minutes, and you file a new one every year. And of course, Kansas Secretary of State requires an annual filing of all nonprofits. So there's an annual report. That again takes 10 or 15 minutes to click all the buttons and fill that out. The nonprofit's also going to have to keep track of incoming flows of donations and grants and be accountable to its members. So you'll have a group of members that are a part of your organization. And you'll also have to form a board of directors and establish policies for the meetings, elections, dues, donations, all of those kind of procedural things that keep a viable nonprofit organization running. So before you set up a nonprofit, you might think through all of these things. There are definitely some pros, but there are some time commitments, and it will, in fact, take a little bit of work just to keep things moving. So on this screen, I just picked up the IRS page that has a 501c3 application process. All you have to do is go to irs.gov, and you can find all of these instruction forms and the forms to fill out. So Nancy, I think one more here. So what if you don't want to go through all of that for a nonprofit corporation, and you want to still try to develop a group and try to develop a trail and organize in some other way? One way to do that would be by partnering with existing foundations, community foundations, for example. A lot of counties and cities in the state of Kansas have community foundations, which they themselves are nonprofits. And many times they will partner with a group, let's say a hiking club or a bike club, to develop trails and actually gather funding for your trail development. Partnering with local governments, governmental units, cities, counties, the state itself, water districts, parks, drainage districts. Those are all possible partners, which your group, who's not a nonprofit, could align with and coordinate with, and maybe through them obtain funding as well. And lastly, finding a fiscal agent, a city or a county who has a park that they'd like a trail built in might be the obvious fiscal agent to go seek the grant funding that you need to build a trail. You would then go build the trail with your group on their behalf, but they would actually be the fiscal agent. They would be handling all of the inflows and outflows of expenditures. So it's a nice way to sort of bridge the gap if you're not set up as a nonprofit on your own. And the example here on the screen, did you enjoy your trail? That's a sign that was recently installed on the Benton Two Angels Trail, which was developed by the city as the fiscal agent through grants from various sources, including Sunflower Foundation. And notice the QR code there on the right-hand side. This is actually at the trailhead. The community foundation, the Central Kansas Community Foundation, agreed to set up a separate fund so that if you go to that QR code and click on it, you can donate, make donations to that fund, which would then be earmarked to be used only on that trail in Benton. It's a kind of a neat way to align yourself with another nonprofit and not have to be a nonprofit yourself. Another example, the Wamego, there's a sort of a sharing or a match grant program Mount Mitchell Prairie Guards participates in, and they have a trail at Mount Mitchell, which is pretty cool. So anyway, next slide, Nancy, and I think we're going to wrap up with a summary. I think the bottom line is there are a lot of pros and cons in setting up a nonprofit or organizing in general, but please consult an attorney if you go down the path of setting up a nonprofit. It's not complicated and it's not rocket science, and it may cost you a couple of $1,000s, but it would behoove everyone to seek out professional assistance in doing that. And if you don't do that, at least check on how that was done by your sister organizations. You can copy an application, you can copy documents, you can copy bylaws, and you can set up your own nonprofit in a fairly straightforward manner. So I think it's on to Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a non-for-profit here in Douglas County that I have been involved with for a couple of years, Friends of Lawrence Area Trails. And I think we're a bit unique in that, we aren't directly involved in trail building. We're not directly involved in trail maintenance. But in 2018, there was a discussion led and coordinated by Livewell Douglas County, which, like Thrive Allen County out of Allen County, really focuses on a kind of a variety of health and wellness related issues We had a healthy built environment work group within Livermore Douglas County. And there really was an interest in how is it that we can catalyze and promote ongoing development of a trail system. And so there was a subcommittee, a governance subcommittee that met after an initial meeting to talk about trail development, which led to the incorporation of Friends of Lawrence Area Trails in 2018. We are an all-volunteer board of directors, as Mike noted. This organization started in 2018. 6 years later, the current composition of the board, while several of the original board members are very involved in the work that we do, the composition of our board, there's no one sitting on the board currently that was part of that initial group. We continue to operate and hopefully continue to thrive. Next slide. We really were born out of the idea, again, that we wanted to create momentum, ensure that there was an ongoing discussion about creating a local trail system. At that time, in our county budget and our city budgets, there were rarely line items for built environment projects, for sidewalk maintenance, for sidewalk building, for trail building. We really wanted to ensure that we were advocating for trail development and building a community of trail users. John spoke to attracting people with a variety of interests, and we certainly wanted to ensure that we were talking with people that utilize trails for a variety of different purposes. Not just recreational cyclists, not just runners, but people with a variety of interests. I think an example of a couple of projects we've done in recent years is one, development of an inventory of sections of trails that are ADA accessible, and building resources so that folks with mobility impairment, mobility issues know how to best access the trail systems in our community. Another project we've been involved in is working with a number of families and the Lawrence Art Center to build a monument of sorts, a recognition to the La Yarda community, which was a Mexican-American community, a neighborhood of individuals that helped establish the railroad and helped them establish and find grant funds to build a recognition to that community. So we've really focused on building that community of trail users, advocating for work. And this slide you can go ahead and advance, Nancy. This slide just a couple visual images of things that we do. Our website and our social media is where we have spent a lot of time and attention. We've been able to attract several thousand folks to our social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. We simply go out to a lot of area events and table and talk about our various local trails. The last slide had a picture of a brochure that we had produced through some grant funding. We haven't done a lot of fundraising to date, certainly not for large projects. But again, we've certainly supported community efforts to develop our trails and help sustain trails. John talked about signage, for instance, back when we had first begun our discussions. We were out at some community events and people were asking about some of our trails and like, well, how do you get from here to there? And we recognized that there are a lot of folks who would like to use area trails that don't understand the system as a whole. And we worked with Parks and Rec, for instance, to develop some signage along the Lawrence Loop, our trail that mostly goes around the community. So we've certainly partnered with those, both with government and other nonprofits. We helped the Lawrence Arts Center raise the funds for the Liarda project that I mentioned. So, I think our role is just to be a cheerleader, to be involved in active discussions in the city, to advocate when needed at city, county commission meetings for funding, to bring people together to support the work. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Hey everyone, thanks for getting this going today. It's been really interesting to listen to everyone's conversation. So I'm Brian Peterson. I'm a professor at Kansas State University of Park Management and Conservation. And I've really loved hearing some of the things that have been said today. One of the things that we really focus a lot on and do research on is understanding what a quality experience is to someone that is a trail user. And that is just so important on a number of levels. One of the major ones being that a lot of times we don't have enough management resources for active rangers to be out dealing with users. And so if users have quality experiences, research shows that they're more inclined to be stewards of the area. They're more inclined to use pro-ecological behavior. So it's really important. And so today, with my presentation, we'll be talking about tech tools for trails. And these tech tools can be used for a variety of reasons. They can be used to monitor use, to predict future maintenance. They can be used to identify problem locations that need educative signs. You could objectively identify the different levels of use for grant opportunities, or figure out what types of trails to design. And all that stuff is very, very important. A lot of times we don't have an average trail user, but we have to design trails for a variety of users. The other thing too is a challenging question can be sometimes where to put not just navigation signs, but educational signs. And those educational signs can really be a fantastic indirect management strategy for helping people achieve those quality experiences. Some of the examples of tech tools I'm going to talk about today, briefly just introduce, are infrared trail counters, human behavior cameras, GPS data loggers, talk a little bit about GIS and some surveys. And in this figure here in the lower right-hand corner, that's actually from passing out GPS data loggers to visitors at Cumberland Island National Seashore to see where they go there. And that's kind of the kind of raw GPS data that we passed out for them. And that was actually to inform, they have the management ability to have roaming rangers. And so they wanted to know when and where should our rangers be out at Cumberland Island. Nancy, if you can take me to my next slide, please. Okay, so before I get into those tech tools, I did want to understand the importance of understanding travel patterns. And this information is about travel patterns is some of the most important information for planning, infrastructure needs, and signage. And I did talk a little bit about that there. On this figure they see to the right, this is actually back to the Grand Canyon conversation. This is actually the rim to rim to rim. I've done it a few times myself. And managers at Grand Canyon were curious about where to put an educative sign because they have trail users that are going at a variety of speeds. You have people like myself who has run across the canyon and back. You have people that are hiking. You have people that are going down to Phantom Ranch just on a day hike. And so there's a lot of different speeds. And a lot of different speeds also happen because there's a lot of steep sections too. And so they were trying to identify which areas have the greatest variety of user speeds to put some trail conduct educative signs on the trail. Nancy, if you can take my next figure. Okay, so let's get into infrared trail counters. And I've used these for a variety of reasons. As many of you probably are aware, they transmit a infrared beam across the trail. It doesn't need to be reflected back. And when that infrared beam is broken, it gets a count. And I have, in the center figure here, I've used this on urban trails. And so I put it in a lockbox like that. I've also hidden them, say in rocks on the right one. And these are great for collecting hourly count data. Sometimes if I want to be very exact, I will use a calibration process with a simple multiplier because sometimes people pass back and forth in front of these and they can be not as perfect as you want. But a lot of times what the information that we're trying to get with tech tools isn't necessarily about the exact numbers. It's about visitor travel patterns. And those patterns of use is very, very important for understanding when and where people are using the trails. So an example of a trail counter is made by a company called Trafix out of Canada. They're pretty costly. They're about $600 each. And so a lot of times these are purchased through grant funds and deployed across a trail network to understand across that trail network the visitor travel patterns. And this is kind of what the output of the data can look like. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see the counts across day of the week. And then on the lower right-hand corner, it's actually a figure of hourly counts put together. And so you can get an idea, are you having most people use your trail in the morning? Are they using it 2 different time periods of the day? Are they using it at lunch? Are they using it in the evening? You can start gaining some extra information about your trail users. Another tech tool that I've employed is the use of human behavior cameras, is what I call them. They're essentially hunting cameras. And I put them up in the right picture. You can see myself putting one up in a tree and just kind of camouflaging it in the tree. Another, for a different situation, I've actually created bird houses to put them in. So on the one in the upper left-hand corner, that trail camera is in a birdhouse. And so people don't know that's there. They don't get curious about it. And so those are really great for, you can use human behavior cameras for understanding counts, but it's also great for understanding activity types. So how many joggers do you have? How many bikers do you have? How many hikers do you have? How many people do you have on dogs? You can use those human behavior cameras to understand that. And one of my favorite brands for this is Moultrie cameras. You can find them at www.moultriefeeders.com. They cost anywhere from about $80 to $180. And so here's a couple of the pictures. And the one on the right is a urban trail. And we can see that we have a jogger there pushing a stroller. And the one in the upper left, this is actually, we were studying river recreation and trying to understand how many people use this site of the river. And you can see it gets quite a lot of use at times. So continuing on, this is kind of aggregating the data. As I mentioned, it's great for understanding different activity types. And so we have counts here. It's actually percentages, frequencies of bikers, walkers, runners, and others. And so you can see that this particular trail, which is an urban cemented trail, gets a lot of walkers and a lot of bikers on it and not as many runners. So that's actually some pretty useful information to get to know who is using your trail and what types of information to put out there. Because again, you want to make sure that you're trying to do everything you can to help them have a quality experience so that they act like stewards of the area. And here's some using cameras, some other data that I produced here just by counts per day. This kind of has a lot to it, but if you look at the legend, I put down the weekday max, weekend max, holiday max, and then the trend lines show the weekday averages, weekend averages, holiday averages. And this was actually supplemented with a survey to understand when conditions become unacceptable. We focus a lot of our research on quality experiences, and through surveys, asking some indicator and threshold questions, we figured out that conditions become unacceptable when people see about 38 other people. And for this situation, it was on a trail at a waterfall, so you get a lot of people there. Moving on. So one of my favorite tools to use is GPS data loggers. And this is great for seeing everywhere they go, what sequence they move throughout your trail, what time they're there, the speed that they move in. And this can be brought into ArcGIS, overlaid with other useful information. So these figures here actually overlaid the GPS tracks with condition classes on the trail. And so condition classes are just quick ways to kind of assign the state of the trail, with the class 1 being that it's in a very good state. Class 4, it's got some issues to it, maybe some deep incision, some widening, some trail braiding, other things like that. And these GPS data loggers, they cost about $60 each. You can see that they're about the size of a flash drive. And they're a wonderful tool to use as well for understanding your trail users. Another thing that they're great for, Nancy, if you take my next slide, is, as I mentioned, understanding speed of your users. And this one isn't necessarily for trails, but we were at Theodore Roosevelt National Park. The managers there wanted to know how fast people are driving around the park, so we passed them GPS data loggers and figured that out for them. Moving on. So another thing that I have found that's really useful is GIS has become a lot more intuitive over the last 5 years. ArcGIS still might be, not considered intuitive for a lot of users, and I get that, but some intuitive software that is free is you can use Gaia GPS. You can go map out maybe where you want to have a trail. So for example, here I went out to my friend's hunting property out by St. Mary's. It's about 250 acres or so. And it's a place that I love exploring off trail. And so I wasn't out here to design a trail by any means, but I wanted to make sure that I was, if I did get, it's not that big of an area, but if I did get turned around, I'd be able to get back to my vehicle. So I turned on my tracking with Gaia GPS, and Gaia GPS is great because it's connected to satellites. And then once it's in near cell phone towers, it uploads all that data. So you don't even need to be within range of cell phone connectivity to be able to use Gaia GPS. And that Gaia GPS, it has a phone app, it has a desktop app that you can use to kind of further analyze some other things, such as the amount of elevation gain and the distance that you traveled, the speed that you traveled. Another option I'm sure a lot of you are aware of is Google Earth is another intuitive option. And then moving on to, I think I got one more slide here. So one of the things that another tool that may not appear super techy is the use of surveys. And trail users that experience good conditions are more likely to act as trail stewards. And so you want people to have quality trail experiences, and information about people's experiences can be determined by surveys. There's a lot of free options out there. I think Google does one. And you can pass out surveys for all sorts of reasons. If you're looking to design a whole new trail network, maybe you might want to survey people to see what they want out of that trail network. Do they want bi-directional travel? Do they want one-way travel? What types of, do they want a multi-use trail? Do they want single track? Surveys can be really good to figure that out. And surveys can also be great to figure out how you can boost things like people's accessibility, which could help with their experience too. So surveys are a great tool that don't require too much technical aspect to them. And then one of the things that I love doing a lot is actually combining a bunch of these tools together. So for example, if I have trail users carry a GPS data logger, and then when they're done with their trip, they're back at the trailhead, I ask them to fill out a survey. And that way I can see where they went and also gather some information directly about their experience. And so that's something that I always love, combining these different tools. So there's a lot of combinations and tools that can be used. And trails, I've already mentioned that they should be designed for quality experiences, and that's something that's going to help trails last longer. So that's something that's come up in the talk today is, once trails are built, the maintenance aspect can become quite costly and whatnot. And if you can get those really good experiences going, people are going to treat those trails better. They're not going to cut switchbacks. And additionally, designing a really great trail network is, it has a strong positive impact to the local economy too. So that's something that you want to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And we have one more unadvertised speaker. Let me stop this share. Brett Riggs, who is the communications and marketing expert at the Sunflower Foundation, is going to tell us about how to communicate.
Thanks, Nancy. Again, my name's Brett Riggs, and I'm the Director of Communications here at Sunflower Foundation. And, one of the things that that sometimes maybe gets overlooked, today we've heard a lot about, once trails are built, you have to maintain them. Maintaining them is a major part of sustainability. But the other thing that you have to do is you have to keep reminding folks that you're there, right? You have to keep letting folks know about your trail. You have to keep showing them new developments at your trail. You have to try to get folks to engage not only with your trail, but also with you. And one of the best ways, frankly, for any organization these days to do that is through social media. For those of you who are, for those organizations that also have websites, obviously websites are a way to do that, but the best way to get people to your website is through your social media accounts. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about how trail organizations can use their social media and maybe some best practices. So just a little bit of my background. I am a former news guy. I've spent many years working in the newspaper industry. And so the first thing that I think about when I think about a social media account is you want to make it newsy. Unless you have a great relationship with your local media and are able to get in the newspaper or on the radio or on TV whenever you want, chances are the best chance you're going to have to be able to promote what you're doing is on your own channels. Again, whether or not that be your website or your Facebook page or your Instagram account, or for those of you who might have YouTube channels. So always be thinking of how you can promote your trail and what's happening at your trail and new developments at your trail. Some of the things that come to mind are, highlighting volunteer work. I see a lot of that on your organization's pages, and that's great because you're always looking for more volunteers. And so, number one, you want to promote any volunteer opportunities. And number two, when the opportunities arise and the work is actually done, you want to get out there with a camera and either take some pictures or shoot some video to show off the work that's being done. But not only show off the work that's being done, but it's sort of an appreciation for the volunteers who helped, showing off the hard work that they put in. So always take advantage of those opportunities. But you also want to share any updates on your trail, whether or not it be physical developments on your trail, new projects, new additions at your trail, events that you might be holding on your trail, awards that your trail might have received, any news coverage that you get, you should share that. Don't just rely on the media themselves to get the word out. Share their article, share their story, get more eyes on that story. So it's all about getting as many eyes on that information. And the other way to do that, and I battle this here at Sunflower Foundation, I have to remind our staff and our board members that if you follow our Facebook page, which you should follow our Facebook page, that you should share what we put up there with your followers, because if it becomes this domino effect. If you share it, then they share it, and then their friends share it. And so the next thing you know, what started off just being 20 or 30 people seeing it, your immediate followers, and all of a sudden you've got hundreds of people and maybe thousands of people seeing something that you post. So don't underestimate the power of the share. It can be a very powerful way to deliver a message to a wide audience. So, but you also have to make your social media posts engaging. One thing is photos, photos, photos. Be visual. You folks have trails that run through beautiful locations here in Kansas. Show them off. Show off your trails. Show off the people who are using your trails. Photos are great. You always want to have something visual. When you can't have a photo, if you have someone with your organization who's handy with creating some type of simple graphic element, that can be used in place of a photo if you don't have a photo. But I would always say photos are best, especially when we're talking about trails. So show off the trails visually as best you can. But people also really love video in this YouTube and TikTok generation. People like short videos. And so don't underestimate the power of a short video. And it can be as simple as just getting out your cell phone. They do not have to be professional quality videos using cutting edge video editing software. They don't have to be that. They can be just right off of your phone, one idea that I immediately thought of, because I have some experience using GoPro cameras, and I'm sure some of you probably have used them as well, since many of you are hikers. Get one of those GoPro cameras and attach it to your cap, and do a video walking tour of your trail, and put that out on your Facebook page or on your YouTube channel. It's a great way to show folks what your trail looks like. And those kind of videos are just, very popular. They get viewed, and videos get viewed. So don't underestimate the videos. Surveys were mentioned earlier in one of the presentations, and social media can be a great way to share surveys, links to online surveys. If you're doing a digital survey, using your social media to reach a wide audience and get more participants in a survey is a great way to help your trail. And the other thing too is, don't think that it's just up to you or somebody in your organization to be the ones that get all the photos. Ask your followers to submit their own photos. That is another great way to engage your audience, engage your followers, and kind of make them feel good about not only the time that they spent on your trail, but maybe make them feel good about the photo that they thought was really cool that they took. Well, ask them, hey, when was the last time you were on our trail? Take a picture of the last time you were on our trail and put it up on our Facebook page, or share it with us on Instagram. That's another way to gain more followers, engage with them, and get them involved with your trail. So the last thing I was going to touch on are just some best practices on social media, and I think this is across the board. It's not just related to trails. This would go for any social media account that an organization is using. The one thing would be avoid at all costs doing text-only posts. Text-only posts are not, they aren't engaged with very well. You want to put photos out there, or video, or some kind of graphic element. Studies show on Facebook in particular that posts that have some kind of a visual element are usually engaged with 2 to 3 times more. So if you want to get out to more people, have more people share your posts, use something visual, use photos, use videos. Encourage followers to engage with your page. Again, ask them to post photos, but also ask them for feedback. Don't be afraid to ask them for feedback on your trail. Now, this can sometimes lead to negative comments, and that's something that we never like on our social media page, but it's something that I think we can put up with as long as it's done respectfully. If the feedback, even if it's negative, is done in a professional, respectful way, there isn't any name calling or anything like that. I think that the negative feedback is something that can help your organization. It can help your trail. You see what your weak points are, and you're able to turn them into strengths. So I wouldn't shy away from that. But remember, if someone does put something inappropriate up on your social media page, you always have the right to delete it or hide it. We are under no obligation to allow anyone to say whatever they want to on our social media accounts. So celebrate the trail, not only your trail success, but celebrate the trail community success. All of you who are on this call are part of the trail community. So I would encourage you to follow each other's pages, see what everyone else is doing out there, see what the best practices are, but not only to help your social media page, but also just to highlight trails around Kansas. It's not necessarily just about your local trail, but highlight the trail down the road too. Do whatever you can to make trails in Kansas a trail community, and we can do that through social media. And again, if you have a website, I would highly encourage you to use your social media channels to share what you have on your website. It can be very frustrating. I have run social media pages when I didn't have a website to fall back on, and the social media page was literally all I had. It can be done, but it is much easier, and your social media page is much more robust if you have a website that you can share from, a website where you house all of the content, whether they be photos, videos, or just news and information, or educational materials. If you have some place to house those, it becomes much easier than to share them on your social media page. And of course, it then draws traffic back to your website. And that should also be a goal as you're looking to market your trail.
Brett, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. That wonderful information. And to Brett's point about photos rule, we always joke here at Sunflower that, you know, we're a health foundation. We try to post what we think is really important health information sometimes. But Brett, what was the most liked post we've ever had?
Well, I don't know if it was the most liked posts we've ever had, but one of the most liked posts recently in recent months was actually just some pictures that I took of our campus after it snowed. And that was all it was. It had nothing to do with health, had nothing to do with any grant making or anything that the foundation was doing. It was just pictures of snow. So
that and the golden labradoodle that came to visit. So
yes.
yeah, never underestimate the power of
Yes.
dogs.
And the nice thing about that is that, you know, I doubt very many of you have one person who is just responsible for, you know, well, maybe you do, but it's probably hard for that one person to have posts on your social media page daily. I mean, it becomes very difficult to push content on social media pages. So make it easy on yourself. Don't always make it so difficult. It doesn't have to be complex. Sometimes it can just be a simple photo of a sunrise or a sunset on your trail, and put that up there, and that's your post for that day. And you might be surprised how many people come and check it out.
I want to thank all of our speakers for, I cannot believe how much content you packed into 58 minutes. It's incredible. And we still have 2 legitimate minutes left. And I'm happy to stay on, and hopefully our speakers, maybe if we run just a tiny bit over the 1 o'clock hour. So we've got quite a few questions in the chat that I'm going to go through, and thank you to everyone that's been answering them in the chat.
Elizabeth?
One of them that I
have-
don't think has been answered yet. Well, this actually just came to me, but I think it's directed toward Dr. Peterson. They wanted to know, if you have limited time and money, is it better to do a trail counter or a trail survey? And I'm sure that's a it depends answer, but would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it all starts at square one. Like, what is going to be the purpose of your information? What information are you looking to gather? You know, these are different tools. You know, we use a McLeod at different times than a Pulaski. These are different tools. They're tech tools, and so you need to know, where are you going with this information? What are you trying to accomplish? And so these aren't just tech tools for, you know, every single purpose. They have different purposes for them. So I think knowing what you're trying to do, what you're trying to accomplish, have that figured out first before you decide on which tech tool to use.
And then thank you for answering the question about the signage, and do you post signs in the area? And it sounds like you're saying, if it's a public area, you don't have to put up a sign that says camera in use.
Yeah, like, so my understanding with the law is that, you know, if I get within, say, like a few feet of people, I'm sitting there videoing, well, I'm getting a lot of private information with that. But if I'm taking pictures from 20 meters away, 30 meters away, that's not private information.
Right. Another question that came just to me, but I was curious too. This is for Chris. You had mentioned that you don't do a lot of fundraising, or at least you haven't at this point. So how does Flat show their value to the city? Like, what makes it most legitimate as an organization?
Well, I think it's just, you know, our fairly constant presence. You know, we as I said, we've got thousands of followers on social media, you know, many of whom engage, ask questions. I mean, we not only are posting, but are, you know, holding conversations with people that are asking questions. We're at a lot of events in the community. We are, present at the discussions when there are advocacy issues around trails that are happening. I would say, it's as a small organization, no paid staff. While we don't do a lot of fundraising, I've actually been surprised with the number of checks that people write with very little effort other than, gosh, we don't do much outside of maybe twice a year, end of the year saying, think about flat as you're making donations. We've occasionally done things like that. We have a big Trails That Connect Us event, and we'll put together a couple raffle baskets, and I've frankly been really surprised by how much financial support we are able to gather on an annual basis, without really having to focus on we're going to do a project to raise money for a section of trail or for signage or whatever the case. I mean, we get a fair amount of unsolicited donations that just come in because people are committed to the idea of supporting work around trails in our community. I don't know if that was a definitive answer. It was a kind of well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure
Well,
what
it's
the formula.
what I took out of that is the fact that you have kind of a constant presence maybe helps in when people are thinking about end of year, I'm going to give a donation for taxes. Hey, what about those flat people? So yeah. Hey, I'm going to run through two more questions. Oh, go ahead, Chris. Sorry.
I was just going to say also, I mentioned, we've helped other organizations, to write grants or to promote their events. And so I really think we're also about being out there to support other community organizations. And I think that is reflected in a two-way relationship that's really important to develop support.
Great. Thank you for closing that loop. I'm not sure if this question from Gary Smith, how important is professional design to the success of a trail design and signage? If Brian, Mike, and John all want to
can do
take it
that.
on, go for it, Brian.
I was just typing about it. Hey, Gary, that's a really great question. And there's different types of signage out there. Two broad categories are navigational signs and then also educative signs. And research has shown that the graphics of the design do matter. Does capture people's attention more. It can be for educative messaging, more persuasive. So that you have the graphic design element. And then there's also a lot of research that goes into, if you do want to put out an educative sign, what cognitive leverage points do you use in concise messaging that's going to be 5 to 10 words to educate them? And that's a big challenge right there. And so there's a lot of research that goes into designing educative messaging that's effective. And there's research that goes into identifying what graphic design is going to be most persuasive and capturing people's attention.
That's great to have actual data to help inform us. Mike or John, anything you want to add sort of based on maybe a little more anecdotal?
No, but I was just going to say, if you're curious about that GPS logger that Brian mentioned, here's the same one. All you have to do is do a Google search for Canmore, CANMORE. It'll come up on your screen. They're about $60, like Brian said. Easy to use,
Thanks,
2 buttons, and they come in really handy. We use them a lot.
Yeah, and those Canmore ones, another great thing that we've used them for is just simply having people mark identifications of litter. And so you have a waypoint feature on it too. Like you can track them with GPS, but they can also be like waypoint. So where do you want them to take those waypoints at? And you can have them do it for a variety of reasons.
Yeah, we use them, Brian, for the same purpose. We ask people to tell us when a tree has fallen on the trail, and it tells me exactly where it is. I can go find it quickly.
Yeah, makes it efficient.
John, I think you wanted to maybe jump in with something and about the trail signage, and then we'll wrap this up.
Yeah, I was just going to speak particularly to Gary's question about trail design, just to give you a little bit more information, particularly up on Lehigh. is that was an all volunteer led effort in terms of the design of the trails. So I guess it depends particularly what your aim is with your trails, what sort of people you want to attract with them. And I would always say push for higher standards. Keeping that quality high is the best thing when it comes to trail design. So definitely defer to the experts in terms of trail design, but don't feel like that's going to deter you specifically from actually making trail. There are free resources, particularly for the public to tap into, that are excellent, that are sort of a good jumping off point for a lot of people.
Thank you. Nancy, I'm going to toss it to you to wrap it up, but I'm just blown away by the content matter we packed into an hour and 4 minutes. Thank you,
That's-
everyone. I'm going to let Nancy close us out.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So today's talk was trail sustainability. It's number 5 out of 6. And next month, we'll conclude our series with rail trail issues. And our little thought for today is from John Muir. Of all the paths you take in life, make sure a few of them are dirt. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. See you next month.